Ciao a tutti e benvenuti a questa video lesson, video registrazione sul Pre-Romantic and Romantic Age. La nostra lezione, ragazzi, parte con un inquadramento generale del periodo pre-romantico e romantico, sull'analisi dei concetti chiave di questa epoca e poi vi rimanda alle attività che sono state inserite all'interno del registro elettronico, unitamente al file in PDF. Let's start. The pre-romantic period of time was prepared by many important historical events. Among them, the most important were the American War of Independence in 1751, the French Revolution in 1789, the Napoleonic Wars between 1793 and 1815, and finally the Congress of Vienna with the establishment of the so-called Ancien Regime in 1815. As for society, the new Industrial Revolution changed rural society into an industrial one. Poetry became the most important literary genre of the period, and all the wars connected with the period caused the widespread of an anti-social, of an anti-slavery feeling throughout Europe. Finally, in the field of literature, we usually divide this period into two main phases. The first one, that we call pre-romanticism, was characterized by some philosophers like Burke and some important poets like Gray and Blake, while the Romantic era can be divided as well into a first and a second generation. In the first generation, we can find important writers and poets like William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, while in the second generation of the Romantic poets, we can find Lord Byron, Percy Shelley, and John Keats. The main events of the period, as we were saying, were the American War of Independence, which established the birth of a new country, the USA, the United States of America. In 1776, George Washington became president after the struggle between the 13 British colonies and Great Britain. The second main event, as we were saying before, was the French Revolution. It brought new ideas of freedom throughout Europe. Finally, the Industrial Revolution, the so-called Industrial Revolution, brought three main consequences. New machines, and as you can see in this slide, here is a small photo of James Watt's steam engine, the first steam engine produced. The second picture shows the open field and the new open fields, so the new techniques applied to farming. And finally, we had more efficient transports as revealed in the steamboat, which is represented in the photo. Industrial Revolution was not a real revolution. It was a new change in society. So with this term, we underline the start of a new era which developed thanks to machines. Many towns were built. These towns were called mushroom towns because they were filled with people, men, women, and children. And as you can see in this picture, Many children worked as well as men. Most of them worked more than men because they were paid less, so they were very convenient. Here you can see chimney sweeper boys, che in italiano significa ragazzi che facevano gli spazzacamini. All the towns were polluted. In Italian it means non mi viene la traduzione in italiano, inquinate, sorry, and overcrowded, which means sovraffollati. And many of these people died before the age of 20 because the life conditions were terrible during those times. As for literature, the Romantic Age was characterized by the rejection of the idea of reason, order, and control, which was typical of neoclassical poetry. Romantic poetry celebrated sensibility and imagination, and it was prepared by the German movement Sturm und Drang, which means in English storm and stress, and in Italian tempesta e impeto. Among the main themes of the Romantic poetry, we can mention dreams and visions, because most poets evoked their dreams even under the affection of drugs. And these dreams became the background of these poems, where nature and the search of solitude was the main source of inspiration. Other themes were childhood, and here you can find a translation, and the poet who most celebrated childhood was William Wordsworth. As he said, the child is the father of man, and this underlines the importance of the child in comparison to the man. Finally, Romantic poetry focused on the individual. Many poets felt themselves rebels, outcasts, and they refused the standards of society. They preferred to contemplate nature, and in this sense, they brought the idea of the French philosopher and writer Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who celebrated the natural style of man, very far from the conventions of society. And this French writer also started the cult of the exotic. As for the role of the poet and for the language used, the Romantic poet was considered a prophet and a teacher who did not address a selected audience. On the contrary, he wanted to be understood by everybody. Even the literary form used was very simple, like the ballad. Lyrical ballads, published by Wordsworth and Coleridge together for the first time in 1798 and then in 1800, and including the famous preface, are considered the manifesto of Romantic poetry. As highlighted in the very famous preface, the poet must express himself as other men express themselves, and this means that the language must be very simple and easy to be understood by common man. The main idea of the period was the sublime. The sublime was theorized by the French philosopher Burke in his essay A Philosophical Inquiry into the Origin of Our Ideas of the Sublime and the Beautiful. According to the philosopher, while beauty is connected with calm, sublime is a mixture of horror and pleasure. So if we have to mention some examples of sublime, this example could be the vastness of the ocean, a violent storm, or a cliff. These images suggest not only pleasure, but also horror, pain. The sublime is connected to the Gothic novel. We were saying before that poetry was very popular, but the Gothic novel also developed during this time. The main themes of the Gothic novel is horror. The main theme is horror. And the setting is the typical medieval setting. So, isolated castles, mysterious abbeys, cemeteries. What matters is the dark and gloomy atmospheres. The sublime also, and the Gothic novel also use the supernatural, that is, vampires, monsters, ghosts, and witches. And as for characters, we have both male and female characters. Heroines are dominated by exaggerated passions, while men can be heroes but also satanic figures, as here Dracula clearly suggests. Important examples of Gothic novels are The Castle of Otranto by Horace Walpole, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and finally The Mysteries of Udolpho by Anne Radcliffe. These books influenced later novels, like for example Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe, and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Stevenson. Spero che questa lezione sia chiara. Adesso sul registro elettronico troverete le attività da fare per questa settimana. Vi ringrazio e vi saluto.